Thank you, everyone. So I'm very excited to be with you today, and I want to talk about designing for happiness in a complex world. So two parts to the talk this afternoon. First, designing in a complex world, and then talk about a little bit about my experiments with the optimization of happiness. So I've actually come to believe that current design and business approaches will inevitably and eventually destroy everything we know. And I really believe this. Okay, some other believers in the room. And one of the big reasons I believe this is because of this statement, that anytime you consider anything less than everything, you're missing something. And a few years ago, I came across the work of Stephen Wolfram, the mathematician and scientist, and a concept called computational irreducibility. And it's essentially the idea that when you have a complex system, you can't actually reduce it and simplify it and still make sense of the entire system in meaningful ways. The entire system is the computation. But think about how we design, right? We isolate a problem. We narrow down the scope of what we're working on until it's something that we can solve for. We then create a solution and we celebrate our solutions, but in reality, we have no idea exactly what we've done. Because in focusing on any particular problem, we've really just ignored everything else. And we've failed to engage with the complex reality in a world where everything is interconnected and nothing exists in isolation. And often in our attempt at solutions, we've really just created more problems and complexity. And in many ways, those consequences are unseen, unknown, unintended, and we're not properly engaging with this complexity. And so just a few examples, and you'll be familiar with all of these, but chairs, we don't think of them as dangerous objects, but the amount of time you spend in them perfectly correlates with the development of heart disease. And you're all enjoying some of that right now. Running shoes in relationship to injury. We're just recently realizing that our fancy trainers actually negatively impact the human gait. The human legs actually evolved to handle the loads of running. And people are throwing out their fancy trainers and now are running barefoot in this amazing barefoot running movement. Lighting and sleep debt. We heard a little bit about earlier in the conference the dangers of sleep deprivation and the amazing problems associated with health that come with that. And we don't think about lighting as being dangerous, but it wreaks havoc on circadian rhythms and other natural patterns. Cell phones, recently listed by the World Health Organization as a possible carcinogen. We love them, they're amazing, we're addicted to them, and it's something that we don't have enough data on yet. It might take a generation of people living with these before we really understand the implications. Sugar. Early research on the dangers of fat, having that removed from our diet decades ago, now replaced with sugar, and we're now learning about its toxicity. And with 66% of Americans obese or overweight, we start to have to ask really interesting questions about a simple ingredient that we all love that's causing real problems. So designers and folks in business look at all of these and say, well, those are just problems. Now we can work on those. But it's actually that type of thinking that perpetuates the issues. And it's the cumulative effect of optimizing for parts that becomes really dangerous. So let's start to think about the cumulative effect of this type of design. So one way to look at it is through utility. And you'll remember your utility curves from economics back in the day. And at the far side of the graph, this is what we're used to. We want to maximize the happiness and satisfaction we get from quantity consumed or the interventions that we have. And we have a diminishing marginal utility. For every additional unit, the amount of satisfaction begins to drop off. But I'm interested in the rest of the curve. As what does that side of the curve look like as we continue to consume? So there are moments of negative marginal utility where one additional intervention actually begins to make us worse off. And then a negative total utility, where one additional intervention makes us worse off than had we never done anything to begin with. And then moments I'm interested in of collapse utility, where the system begins to buckle under the change that's going on. And we even have to start asking about utility floors, moments where the entire system collapses, moments of extinction or other things. Another way to think about these cumulative effects is that I kind of see the Earth tending towards cycles, towards equilibrium, towards balance, life and death. But in design and business, we seek growth. And growth is actually incompatible with homeostasis in a closed system. It's essentially a cancer. If cancer were a business, you would invest in it immediately. It dominates the local cells, it's fast, it's disruptive, It has amazing growth plans. The only problem with it is that it eventually kills the host. And finally, we often talk in design and in innovation about the positive impact of our work. And we even see an acceleration of our ability to affect larger and larger portions and at a greater scale. It's kind of the idea, though, that even with the invention of the ship was the invention of the shipwreck. And there are those unknown, unforeseen, and unintended consequences that are also increasing in kind of scope and scale. And in a way, it doesn't matter if our interventions are good or bad. They're just different. They're change. And where we might have had kind of an equilibrium and a balance early on, we begin to destabilize the system. We get moments of cascading, collapse, destabilization. And then like a cancer, we have to start asking questions about host death. And I think of the global financial crisis. I think of the state we're in with obesity. And I think of issues like global warming as the outcomes of the cumulative effect of our optimizing of parts and not considering everything. Okay, so you're thinking, I thought this was a talk on happiness. I don't know what's going on. So what do we do? What's the direction we can go, and is there a way out? And I don't know the exact answer, but I believe that we need a dramatically new way to approach the complexity with which we design. And I think we actually need to consider everything. And in a nod to Stephen Wolfram, I think we need a new kind of design. And so I'll just share a few ideas, principles that might help us begin to relate or begin to think about the actual complexity that we're dealing with. Even when we simplify systems and try to understand them, we're really just ignoring the realities of the state in which we're designing. So again, anytime we consider anything less than everything, we're missing something. And there's a bit of humility that we suddenly take to every project when we realize that. Nothing can ever be isolated from everything because it's always anything because it's always connected to everything. So it doesn't matter the industry that you're in. Anytime you draw a circle around something, it's actually false. Everything is connected in some way, and even if it's separated by a number of degrees. Good is good and bad is bad and good, and often we can't tell the difference. And hormone replacement therapy is the greatest thing we've ever seen 1 year, and a few years later we realize it has serious implications for feminine health. Anytime we do something, we don't know exactly what we've done. Our knowledge of the system is always limited, and we'll never know everything. This will always be the case, and never even know everything we don't know. We're always kind of stumbling through our understanding of these complex systems. And then even if we did know everything, we wouldn't know what would happen tomorrow until tomorrow. There are certain kind of speed limits, computational speed limits, and if the entire system is the computation, the only way to know what will happen is to let it run until tomorrow. So I've kind of come to the belief that the only way to ideally handle everything is a theory of everything applied to everything is our only hope of saving everything. Okay, well, this is not possible. But what I've found is that the very attempt at considering everything dramatically changes our design intent. And so I began to try and undertake this. What would it look like if I could consider everything? And what would the design intent of everything be? And so I started to think about the different ways in which we design, and many of our design intent, faster, stronger, better. All of these things, I think, we undertake them ultimately because we believe they will increase our satisfaction or our happiness. And so I thought that perhaps happiness is the ultimate design intent, or the design intent of everything. And so I said, okay, well then what is happiness? So I took a perspective of evolutionary happiness, that happiness is actually an evolved state of body and mind that indicates to us when our needs in terms of survival have been met. And so might I achieve a type of happiness as a starting place by optimizing my basic needs? So I began measuring my happiness on a daily basis. How happy am I? And I began, along with a number of other metrics, from my weight to my sleep to my blood pressure to my cognitive speed to my flow, self-control, about 26 metrics in all. And then I undertook a series of experiments to begin optimizing for my happiness. So I started with the optimization of my air. I learned how to breathe. I realized I didn't know how to do that. And amazing effects from breathing. Learned about indoor and outdoor air quality. This is an experiment where I began wearing a mask to avoid cigarette smoke and pollution on the streets. I began optimizing my water. I stopped drinking soda pop and juices, learned about mineralization and different pH, no alcohol, coffee, or tea. I worked on the optimization of my sleep. I lowered my room temperature, got rid of lights and screens in my room. I began waking up to natural light. Optimization of my diet. I ate more fruits and vegetables, more fish, less red meat, eliminated refined sugars and processed foods from my diet. Worked on the optimization of my movement. So I began doing some yoga each morning. I got rid of my desk at work and began walking on a treadmill desk between 4 and 16 miles a day. And even began working on the optimization of my material possessions. So I took an inventory of everything I owned in London and then began measuring its use against its impact on my happiness. And I'll be honest, I found that most things had almost no impact on my happiness. And I've literally gotten rid of almost everything except for a handful of t-shirts, a couple pair of pants. And I do have a few suits for any time I'm back working with Mayo. But the experiments were fascinating to me. I lost 25 pounds in a matter of weeks. The way I satiated with food completely changed. Flavors in vegetables completely changed, and things I didn't enjoy before suddenly became enjoyable. I saw improvements in cognitive speed. My blood pressure and resting heart rate went down. And ultimately, I was quite happy. I even count the experiment in a way with helping me avoid a pretty major health incident. I had a small mark on the back of my shoulder a couple of years ago, and I asked a GP about it, and he pointed to other spots on my back and said, it's nothing to worry about. It's just a scar or lesion. And a year later, through the experiments, my skin kind of changed completely, and it suddenly became very apparent that the scar was not supposed to be there. And I was diagnosed with a rare form of skin cancer called dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans. And I think it's one of the better ones to get, but still quite a scary experience. After the kind of help of the NHS and a Mohs surgery procedure, I'm doing well a year on. I was grateful for these kind of experiments leading to that diagnosis. The other thing is that it completely changed the way I think about happiness. We tend to think about happiness as sort of this ethereal, difficult to understand feeling, and many of our beliefs about it are socially and culturally constructed, or even designed for us by companies that are looking to sell certain products and services with the promise of happiness. And I realized that much of happiness, I think, can be achieved through the optimization of these evolutionary basics. So the experience was actually so profound that I created a company called Masamichi Sozo, and this is Japanese for Correct Path Imagined, and the opportunity to optimize for human happiness through the consideration of everything. So the company helps participants to optimize their evolutionary basics and see the effect that those changes have on their happiness. And the other thing the company searches to do is to serve as sort of an intermediary between many of the messages that we have from other companies in the world. It's not that these products and services are bad, but in a way they don't care about us at all. They're optimizing for profit. And so the opportunity for optimizing for individual happiness is very different. And in a way, I guess Apple would sell me an additional device, and it doesn't matter if it's my last $400 in my pocket. It doesn't matter if I had a square meal for lunch, or they don't care about my sleep at night, or my relationship with my mother. All of these things that fundamentally probably have a much bigger impact on my happiness. And it's not that these things aren't important or aren't interesting. The question is, why would I even begin to pursue them if I haven't optimized these evolutionary basics? And I see the same thing in a lot of our approaches to health and wellness. So many of the problems that we're chasing after are secondary, and they're on kind of a very different level than the opportunity to make major adjustments through these fundamentals that are much closer to our happiness, that have kind of evolved alongside it. So if there are takeaways today, I just share a couple of thoughts. It's that our current design and business has a problem in that we fail to account for the complexity of a world where everything is interconnected and nothing exists in isolation. And we celebrate our designs, but we only do so because we're ignoring a large part of the puzzle. And I think if we really want to achieve some of the dreams and hopes that this audience has and others have for wellness, for health, and I think most importantly for happiness, I think we have to radically change our approach. And while not possible to consider everything, I think the attempt of radically expanding our understanding, our scope, and our consideration in the world dramatically changes what we see as important, dramatically changes what those priorities are, and dramatically changes what we see as possible solutions to some of these efforts. So thank you very much.
So a couple of things. One, actually three. First of all, your company, what's the name of it?
Masamichi Sozo.
Right. Yes. Now, the clients that you take on, how are you different in the kinds of consultations that you do and design work that you do for them? How are you different from a personal trainer?
I think actually there would be a lot of similarity there. I think the only change would be is the focus perhaps of the trainer. So where they might have a specific area of an individual's life that they're interested in optimizing, a company like Masamichi Sozo really considers everything. And one of the things that happens then is you're in a way asked to make some hard trade-offs. So for example, I have to go home at about 9:30 when the party's just getting started because I need to be in bed on time. So I don't know that a personal trainer might ask those sorts of trade-offs for you, but that becomes something important in the optimization of happiness through the consideration of everything.
All right, then extending the personal trainer to all of these other considerations that a traditional commercial personal trainer probably wouldn't advise. How are these metrics for optimization of happiness that seem to be relevant to you not a form of, I guess, sort of Buddhist narcissism in the sense that they may be relevant to you, but unless everyone else ascribes to those metrics, it's difficult to have a collective impact on this optimization of happiness track.
Yeah, so I mean, that is one of the tricks is I guess in a way, whether I'm caring about, whether it's narcissistic or focused on the individual or focused on everything, the impact of individual behavior is still there. So whether you're focused on how your personal behaviors affect the environment or affect the happiness of others, the impact is still there. And you're right, it only really gets interesting when you have a collective that kind of actually cares about everything else going on.
So what would the metrics be for a collective optimization of happiness using traditional institutional means? I suppose you have the Communist Party in China that's a mediator of what is optimal collective happiness, and then you've got American democracy as two pretty big examples, but I wonder if they could ever get to the state that you're looking for here.
Well, I've been really interested actually in Europe. There's been a lot of discussion around gross national happiness. And we measure success here in the States by GDP, and our GDP goes up and up and up, but we're no happier than we were years ago. And so metrics like gross domestic happiness might become a really interesting way to begin making policy decisions. There's a group called New Economic Foundation in the UK that's suggested a 21-hour work week. And they say if we really, we've realized many of our basic needs through advances in technology. And if we really want to see meaningful impacts in health and happiness, it's not in working more. It's actually in refocusing some of these efforts, spending more time with family, with friends, with leisure, hobbies. That's where we'll see real impacts in happiness.
So in a sense, part of what you're talking about here is that the industrialized world and the sociological changes that took place beginning centuries ago and are proceeding now with technological change have kind of inverted the human identity in the sense that what we used to do as a way of improving our lives, now we consider to be our lives, and the issues of family and health are secondary to chasing this kind of industrial prosperity model.
Absolutely, and then the cumulative impact of that chasing is catastrophic to the system.
So do you advise clients give up on the industrialized world and forget about economic growth, and they go, man, I wish we'd thought of that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard sell.
Yeah, hard sell, yeah.
But I honestly believe we can't get away from some of these dangers without really questioning that approach. And the optimization of profit doesn't make us better off. And I think we tend to only deal with things when they become a real concern, or when things start to collapse, and we're actually beginning to experience some of those larger collapses now.
I said 3. I'm probably going to end at 5 here.
Okay.
Number 4 is, how is the attempt to consider everything, and Aristotle probably would have been surprised to hear that it's impossible to consider everything. I think he probably thought it was possible. I don't know if he would have considered himself a designer, but how is the consideration of everything different from, maybe it isn't, religion?
It's an interesting question. I think the consideration of everything, well, I guess it is, in a way, it's an acknowledgement of what we don't know. There is, in a sense, an element of faith, and we tend to ignore that in the sciences. We see a new paper come out, and we treat it as complete fact, but it doesn't acknowledge the vast amount of information that we really don't know. And so, in a sense, considering everything is acknowledging then that there is this universe of complexity that we really don't understand, and we're offering up this intervention, but we're acknowledging at the same time how inadequate we are to kind of understand the entire system.
So in many ways, what you're talking about is in concert with a lot of what some of the other presenters have suggested, that we need to fuse whatever our mission is with a sense of deep collective values and really understand where we want to get to, as opposed to simply doing the numbers.
Absolutely, but on a radical scale.
Right.
And again, just if an institution is optimizing for profit, you're already missing the point. And that also that the priorities completely change. Why would I even offer this product and service if it could be solved for through much simpler means, like the optimization of sleep or diet and these things?
Alone, you're just dealing with individual problems.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And I'll just mention too that the cumulative impact of those things is pretty spectacular. I don't know if you've experienced perfect sleep over months and months, or perfect diet. It feels pretty good. But it's foreign to the way in which we live, and we've almost designed a world that's antithetical to those types of experiences.
Yeah, and I think there are many people out there, and many people who've even spoken here, who I think would absolutely agree that the pursuit of these kinds of optimizations produces a sense of well-being that, if you could bottle it, would be a spectacular product. But of course, that's not the way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, another part of the problem.
So before we go, everybody has the picture in their mind of his, would we call that an apartment, or would we call that a telephone booth?
Yeah.
That you were living in? That's an apartment?
Yeah,
in London?
Space capsule.
Right,
yeah,
right. And he was saying that most of the stuff that he has, he got rid of because it has no sort of evaluative contribution to the optimization of happiness mission. I'm just got that picture in my mind now, and I'm thinking, and looking at your feet, most of those shoes are gone, right?
So yeah,
right. Almost none of those shoes are left.
I have one other pair of black shoes, and that's it.
And that's for Mayo.
That's for Mayo.
Right.
Exactly.
And the bed. Did you stick with the bed?
I still have the bed. Yeah.
The actual bed.
The bed is still there.
The bed is still there.
I've still got work to do. This is an ongoing experiment.
Right.
So.
All right. Here is the $65,000 question. Right here. Did you ditch the cello, dude?
I didn't ditch the cello.
All right.
I keep the cello.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.